Judd, could you paste the Etherpad link into the chat?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
And then for the record of, again, this is the Dell OpenCrowbar planning call from February the 6th, 2014. Right now we don't have any external folks on the line. We're all Dellers. So I figured we'd do a quick review of the sprint stories that we've been working on and what we're planning on doing, and then discuss what's wonderfully appearing on our agenda. So to kick things off, I'll head over to Jira, although we're not supposed to, so it's not a public resource yet, and indicate some of the things that we're working on just for completion. In the previous sprints, we've been on some Windows issues. We've been working on using the Crowbar 2 code to create and update attributes. Dave Patterson gave a really good presentation on our sprint review, and we should document it and get it out there, and how to add attributes to bar clamps, and reviewed how attribute, what's it called, syntax checking. It's not just syntax checking. What's the word I'm looking for?
Validation.
Validation. Thank you. Validation in our current structure is, we try to keep it in the model, but there are plenty of situations when attribute validation actually has to happen on the client. And hopefully Rails 4 will be helping us address this, and other features will be helping us address this. Chris Dearborn put a, very much to my interest, preliminary Burke-Shell support into OpenCrowbar, and I really liked what I saw, and it seemed really reasonable. I'm going to be picking that up this sprint. Chris, what else were you working on?
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that work is in the old Crowbar repositories, not in the OpenCrowbar repositories, because we haven't switched over yet to OpenCrowbar. The other thing I just finished up was I did some work on the upstream OpenStack Chef cookbooks to add in the ability to specify the IP address to bind a service to, instead of what the cookbooks currently do, which is to look up the IP address based upon an interface name. So I've submitted some changes to upstream to allow that, and they haven't been reviewed yet, but they're not critical for the Havana release for those cookbooks, so they're kind of on the back burner right now, but hopefully we can get those reviewed and get those changes in relatively soon.
Cool. Thanks.
Yep.
Virginia, who's not on the call, was deeply involved in managing schema and creating databases for within the database bar clamp. Is there anything else from, say, our Crowbar team that we've been interesting? Oh, and Wayne did tons of work on the IPMI and BMC bar clamps and features, and that's moving along at a good pace. There's in all these things, there's been a lot of learning that's had to happen. But as with any new software, that's really to be expected. Is there anything else before we talk about what we're considering, what we'll be committing to for the next sprint?
No, I think that's a good status update.
Cool. So for me, I was away for most of last sprint, and we just touched things really lightly this past week. But this coming week, I'll be tearing apart what we've got so far in Workshelf 3. It's going to give us a lot of some really important new features to Workshelf, and it's also now under the protective care of Chef Incorporated. They've got a couple developers dedicated to it full time, and they'll be shipping it with their client and server product. So I'll be spending a lot of time with that this upcoming sprint. And I'll also be writing a better design for Docker workload nodes. It had occurred to me that Docker workload nodes, as I tried to implement them before I left on vacation, were so different from typical workload virtual machines that we were going to have to create a mode or a series of tags within Crowbar to indicate which core bar clamps would actually be addressable to a container. And then once a container is running, how we control a container has several options. The typical SSH in can either run scripts or run chef recipes. Doesn't really fit so well with the container model, because the container model, you have the option of setting up SSH, but you can also attach to it through standard input and standard output, as it's just a process on the core system. And you don't want to be running a lot of services within the container other than the service the container is meant for. So it takes a little refiguring out how we would go about deploying typical workloads. So those are the two things I'm committing to for this upcoming sprint. Unless everything changes during our internal Dell sprint planning. Any other folks want to mention what they're planning on getting up to, so we could maybe even help each other out?
I can tell you I'm planning on spending some time on the documentation in the area of the Crowbar Developers Guide, based on the work that John just did a pretty good reorg, and I'm going to be following up with that and fleshing things out. I'm expecting that to be primarily documentation work. There may be a couple of code changes in there, but it'll be mostly documentation.
Cool.
On the OpenStack side, so I'm planning on wrapping up that preliminary Docker support over the next day or two and getting that put to bed. So hopefully that'll be done before the start of the next sprint. And upcoming sprint, I think on the OpenStack team we've pretty well gotten nailed down the messaging, database, OpenStack, bar clamps. I think there's a little bit of work left to do on the Keystone bar clamp. So Regina will probably be working on that, and we'll probably start the next bar clamp, which I believe will be Glance. So I think that's what we're looking to do on the OpenStack side.
Cool.
Is someone taking notes of that?
Oh, John, I put you up to it.
Yeah. I got distracted momentarily. My apologies.
Well, at least it's in the audio recording. Should we perhaps move on to our bonus round? Actually, before our bonus round, discussing the renaming core. I'll pull up the email that I sent with a couple of the possibilities. Everybody wants to see that I like to read slashed out. All right. Hey. Oh. Okay. Arcadia adds some consistency in naming docs, but so the situation has been that, you know, I've got my GitHub account name is New Goliath, and that when I fork the repo to be able to do my own pull requests back into the OpenCrowbar repo, I end up with products just named Core, which don't really mean much when you're looking at it next to lots of other projects like Chef and Berkshelf. See here, you can pretty much tell what project is coming from. You know, when we said bar clamp, at least we knew it was Crowbar. The Berkshelf guys tend to, you know, Berkshelf, Chef guys prefix with Chef. The pipe work was an outside project, and that's been brought into Docker. User D is just its own project. So, you know, a Nova repo might be better called OpenStack Nova. So what do folks think about calling it, say, OpenCrowbar Crowbar Core?
Could you paste what the current proposal is into the Tinkin EFEB?
On its way.
Thank you, sir.
I want to do something like that. So, we might, Rob also thought instead of sledgehammer, it would be
Discovery agent or discoverer.
Thank you so much. Just discovery. It was.
Yeah, that looks good to me.
Yeah, right. It just seems like
The downside of doing this is our package names are going to become humongously long, which is quite out of character for Linux. It means that our package name is going to be OpenCrowbar-OpenStack-docs-2.0.0-big number version number .noah.rpm. It's going to blow a lot of systems up, in my opinion.
Lost you there, John. Are we talking about repo names or are we talking about package names?
Package names.
Okay.
Currently, our semantic is to use the OpenCrowbar moniker ahead of the repo name as the package name. The intent is to package one repo per RPM.
I understand. So that means just thinking out loud here, I mean, it may not make sense for us to have the package names mirror the top level repository. I mean, it could be OpenCrowbar core, OpenCrowbar docs for package name, but it would be silly to call it OpenCrowbar/Crowbar core in the package. Because the thing is, when you look at the repo name, since we're using GitHub, the repository name is arbitrary. We're calling it OpenCrowbar, but you can rename it to anything you want locally or when you make a personal clone. So it's a placeholder. The important names are the names of the actual repos. They can also be changed, but the top level org name is just there as a locator. So I'm not sure that the packages should pick that up. They do need to have some sort of prefix, but I think OpenCrowbar would be fine.
Someone's picking up
I
a
have
lot of
noise.
noise.
I have noise. I don't.
Hey, this is Victor.
Yes, Victor.
Excellent. So Rod asked me to call in on this. If we're going to rename the repo, person gets tasked to do that gets to fix all the stuff that will break in our current dev processes.
I would
Victor,
personally...
can you elaborate?
Well, I've kind of been writing all this code that does things like sets up Docker admin nodes and other such fun things, and bootstrapping admin nodes and all that other fun stuff. And it kind of relies on the current repository layout that we currently have.
On the layout or the names?
The names are part of the layout.
We can change. Just means a bit more effort.
Yes.
Nothing is cast in concrete, but the trouble is when you've started to put the building up, changing the shape of the concrete often means destruction of the building, or partial anyhow.
Let's look at from slightly a different angle. If we want other people working with us on various components, let's say we work with, I don't know, take HP to work with us on their hardware, or Ceph creating another workload, or somebody else doing other thing. What is a recommendation of how they would create new repos, or how they will contribute to the current repos?
This all just came up because when I forked the repos, I just had something in mind just called core. and core could sort of be anything, and I was concerned about collisions for people who are contributing. The way they're going to contribute is the typical way that everybody contributes to every other open source project on GitHub. So I understand Victor's, hesitance to rename.
Yeah. From my perspective, you have the org name and you have the repositories in the org name. You made a good point, which is when somebody forks what's currently called core, they end up with a repo called core in their GitHub organization or locally, and the context may be lost. I wouldn't mind us...
There's no reason that your personal fork has to have the same name as the stuff in OpenCrowbar.
Yeah, that's right.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And the only one that I considered, the only one I thought might need to be renamed was core, but I was fairly happy with the current organization. My preference would have been to call core kind of Crowbar.
Or OCV. Or OCV
Okay.
core.
Too short.
I'm not much into the shorty names for the repo myself. It's an acronym, so it may not be obvious. I thought we could rename core to Crowbar. The remaining repositories I didn't have a problem with. I do question whether we want to continue the model of having the RPMs named the same as the repos, simply because I think in the future the packaging in repos really shouldn't reflect the source code organization. Or at least we shouldn't commit to that. It's likely to merge short term, but I wouldn't want to commit to that.
So the thinking behind that, Mike, was that what we want to do is install one package for Crowbar and one package per workload.
I agree. I think the RPM packaging is correct. I'm just raising the point that I don't think the RPM packaging should commit to always tracking the organization of the source code. That's all. So I don't think the naming issue we mentioned, where the packages are based on the repos, I don't think we should maintain that link. But I like your RPM packaging. One per workload. For example, there would be a core Crowbar RPM. There might be a Crowbar hardware RPM. There would be a Crowbar OpenStack RPM. To me, that makes sense. Crowbar Hadoop RPM. I just don't think we should commit forever that those RPMs reflect the actual organization of the code, because it may change.
There are about 15,000 foundation source code packages that make up the Linux distribution spectrum. And the general pattern for better than 95% of those is that the package name follows the name of the source code.
Well, it follows the name of the project, but they're not all on GitHub, so they're not tied to particular repo names. I guess I'm in a nitpick mode, though. All I'm really saying is I like the concept of the packaging. I don't think we should kind of codify that the package names will be permanently yanked from these particular repository names, but I think mirroring them makes sense right now.
I have no personal attachment to how the naming is done. As far as I'm concerned, anyone can change whatever is there. It's an open project.
Yeah.
The key question really is, what do we gain by changing? Other than a little bit of namespace wonkiness, who are we appealing to? Who is our target, and what's the win by changing at this point?
Yeah, so I'll come down and say that I don't think it makes sense to prefix every repo with Crowbar - whatever when they're already organized under a single GitHub organization. The only name that I thought might be subject to discussion would be the core, which I thought made more sense to be called Crowbar, but I have no strong preferences. I just thought it might be a little less confusing to call it Crowbar. But I'd hate to go in and prefix everything with Crowbar - whatever. That's what namespaces are for.
Well, if you look at the share right now, the Berkshelf guys, for example, prefix their API server with Berkshelf. So the organization is Berkshelf, and the product is Berkshelf, and then everything is either prefixed or suffixed with Berkshelf except solve.
And I love the prefixed or suffixed. It's like, okay, let's have a convention.
Yeah, well, it depends on the process. It depends on the goal, the use of that particular repo, right? So Vagrant Berkshelf, it usually just gets Vagrant comes first, because it's a Vagrant plugin.
So
and solve is sort of it's a side project of the Berkshelf people, but it's not applicable only to Berkshelf, But all of our Crowbar stuff is applicable only to Crowbar. I considered something like, Sledgehammer, which could potentially not be only used with Crowbar, but the likelihood of that happening is very slim. So it's fine to call it Crowbar, and maybe eventually we'll have something within any of our repos that are not project specifically designed for use with Crowbar.
yeah.
That's the argument for prefixing everything. And I do, with Rob's big -2 about splitting out docs.
Yeah, splitting out docs makes no sense because docs are already versioned in the core repo. So Crowbar docs are part of it. So I'll put a -1000 there. I don't want to split out docs because docs, by definition, the docs that are related to the code, the developer level stuff, are tied to the specific bar clamp. So we don't need a separate repo for it.
Okay. I only introduced docs because there are a lot of systems that make it very easy to point to a specific docs repo in order to publish out to a website or a wiki or to some other publishing.
But we already made the decision that we weren't doing that. That's the problem.
Okay.
And it's not so much I have a strong opinion one way or the other. It's just we embedded the docs into the code with a code generation system. So to split them out now would be a huge effort in terms of the doc generation code and stuff. I do think we're still going to pull the docs out of those repos and publish them to a website someplace. As for the renaming, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other, but I would prefer that we resolve it and get it done because there are a lot of scripts and tools that are picking up these various names, and I don't want to go through another great renaming in a couple of months.
Okay.
Victor, you had some points related to to the naming of stuff.
Sorry?
I thought Victor had a couple of points about why he thought we shouldn't be renaming. I'm kind of 50-50.
I've already written some significant chunks of code that rely on the current naming scheme.
Yeah, and so have I. So.
And if we do rename, then some schmuck who isn't me gets to fix it all up.
So then, Victor, as your load would be the heaviest in this change, I think we should leave it up to you.
I think Victor indicated that the schmuck was not going to be him. Anyhow, yeah, and that's my concern about the renaming too. It's my only real concern is we do have stuff that reference these repos at various levels. So if we're doing anything, it's going to have an impact in it. It's going to ripple down at some stage.
Wait, all this stuff in your code isn't parameterized?
Parameterization means that you have to supply a crap ton of arguments that I really would prefer you don't have to supply, or that the code can just figure out on its own.
Yeah, I'm just teasing. So we're saying if I really want this to happen, I've got to fix the code once I break the repo. All right.
Yep.
Yeah, and also since this one impacts quite a few of us, we need to actually schedule the update if we're doing it and decide when we're doing it, when it's happening, and just make it happen. And as I said, I'm not that concerned. I got bigger fish to fry short term.
All right, so I'm kind of hearing that this wonderful conversation, as enlightening as it's been, will now, the motion is what is it? The motion doesn't carry, the motion fail?
I think the motion failed.
It's
Motion
tabled.
Well,
Plus, I do think we'd need a broader discussion on this, which opens up a bigger can of worms.
Well, guys, just to be clear, before we open it up for public and public start using it, we need to iron that out and close that issue with whatever the final thing will be before we make it public.
Yeah.
Public? This is a public. We're in a public forum right now.
Right now, we are not actively soliciting participation.
Oh.
It is public, and the only participants right now are internal to Dell. Once we open it up and actively solicit players, we'll have to make the foundation sturdy.
I'm sorry, Arkady, but this is an open project already. The code is out there, and there are a number of people who are already working with the OpenCrowbar code in the community. And I do expect and anticipate contributions, whether we solicit them or not.
That level of change of the structure of the code base better be done before the number of contributors go way up, and we are working a lot more with contributors and continuous code change.
Yeah. So I'll weigh in and say right now I think it's an idea. I don't feel strong enough to say we need to do this right now. I understand some of the trade-offs, but maybe the right action to take is, rather than us making a decision now, to spend some time figuring out exactly what the impacts are. Because I know there's going to be some impacts on me. There are going to be impacts on various continuous integration and QA tool sets, and if we are making a change, we need to understand the impact. That's where I'd stand, and I don't think I know the impact yet.
So I think I'm gonna give it a try and see what fails during this sprint, and let you all know at the next meeting, at the design meeting next week, what happened, what hilarity.
When you try that, you'll need to make your changes across all the OpenCrowbar repos, Judd.
No, I wouldn't do it in the OpenCrowbar community, in the OpenCrowbar organization. I would just do it in my organization.
Yes, I understand that, but you'll need to do it across the build tools as well as the core, as well as anything else that's been worked on.
Okie doke.
I'm not complaining. I'm just giving you a pointer there.
Sure. Yeah, no, I was just confused. Yeah, I wouldn't be working in the OpenCrowbar repo. I'd be working, on GitHub. I'd be working on my own clone. So, yeah, that's fine. Known. So this subject is dead. The horse is dead. Until next time.
Oh no, not a dead horse.
More for the glue factory.
Too.
Get around to our bonus round of reviewing John Terpster's thrilling documentation reboot.
Are you going to walk through that, or shall I, Judd?
Please, sir. Can I give you
How do
control?
I become Yes, if you would.
John T. What can I do? All right, you're getting presenter.
Well, I already have the thing present, and it's already running. Why does it want to? Come on. What's happening? Try that again if you would, please, Judd.
Trying again. You can also request from me if you'd like. Oh!
Aha.
And there's Octocats. Yay!
Can you see it?
I can see it.
Yep.
What operating system is that? That looks familiar.
Yeah, it does. Okay.
It's called Vista or something like that.
Everyone seems to have gone rather faint at the moment, but I'll press on. When we open up the GitHub repo on the root of the core repository, it automatically brings up a README file. The README gives a brief welcome to and overview of OpenCrowbar. This morning I added a facility to go directly to the Docker fast start. And there's the TLDR reference, it's the same thing. And the good oil version of that document is here. So that link works. Stepping back into this front-end document, we can go directly to the index here. This index will ultimately be automatically generated. It is now laid out according to the development guide infrastructure. So here is the how-to on deployment of OpenCrowbar RPMs on CentOS 6.5. Gives a detailed overview of our objectives, the installation process, preparation, how to go about deploying it, what sort of things need to be covered, and so forth. Back to this document, there is also a new document that documents the project layout. That's the top-level directory stuff, and then the principles and template for directory layout within the project itself. The design concept has a link, and all of these documents do unfortunately need to be reviewed and updated. Closing that, going back to the next one, the APIs are documented. Here are all of the APIs. I will be updating those with Derek's assistance in the next half hour. There is a description of the APIs, so each document, each of those directories should have a master markdown document in it that describes the contents of the documents in the directory that it should be the master of, and that should be indexed. The title that is across the top of the document is what will ultimately become the title that will appear. Right now it says description of APIs. That will be whatever that top line title is. It is intended that that will become the title that will have the link to that top level document. The directory itself will also, containing the documents, will also have a link to take people to the directory. That way they can see all the files that are in there. The descriptive document, the master document in that directory could then have links to individual documents that are important within that directory. Any questions or comments at this point?
Just Mike here, John, just to point out, in case anybody's confused, the code is already in place in Crowbar to generate most of this TLC stuff. I'm aware there are some glitches in it, but the code to actually generate these indexes and follow the conventions you described is in place, but I think there's a couple of glitches in it.
Right, but in discussion with Rob yesterday, it would appear that we may need to update that a bit.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'll be looking at this next sprint.
There is a workflow overview document here that still needs some significant surgery. There are blanks to add docs here. If anyone feels inclined, please help add guidance documentation for the day-to-day and any release workflows that may be needed. I guess I could step through an awful lot more, but I'm more interested in questions and feedback.
It looks good. Basic feedback, it looks good.
So I stress again that I tried to preserve what looked like the most recent, most complete information. I have in all likelihood trounced on someone's precious work. I apologize for that if that has happened, and I would urge anyone who has been impacted by that to either fix it or get in touch with me and guide me so that I can fix it, because my intent is not to blow away effort that has been expended. And that's it from me. Do I have to hand back to you, Judd, or how does this work?
Well, we could move on. Are there any questions? I am really excited to hopefully have the time to dig into this and add a whole lot of docs myself. Thank you very much for going through all of that.
My pleasure.
You can hand back to me. I'm basically gonna it's full time.
You are the presenter again. Good.
So if Victor had threatened to show us his latest SIG pull request, Victor, if you want to do the Skype share thing again, that'd be super cool.
Skype share thing. I can do that.
We have just 11 minutes left on the call.
I have nothing else to cover on my side. I mean, I think it's going to be a busy sprint because we'll be doing quite a bit of work to move towards shifting over to this repo. But
so I'm trying to call you, Judd, but you ain't answering.
I'm sorry. I don't hear you ringing. Victor Laufer. Video call. Actually, we don't need a video call. Hi.
Yeah, don't call me on Skype because I'm logged in on two places and it's picking my phone.
There we go. Oh.
Okay.
So mute. And let's go full screen and where's this window? All right, can folks see that?
Okay. Oh, And it just got merged. Yay. Okay. So pretty much what I've been doing for the last 3 days. Rob put a bug in my ear on like Thursday, wondering how hard it would be to migrate the core Crowbar framework in OpenCrowbar to run on top of Rails 4.0. So I did that, and the upshot is it allowed some simplification to how we were abusing things in application controller and single table inheritance, and it swapped out the model-based access control with adder accessible and adder protected, and that layer of control has been pushed up to using strong parameters in the controllers. So for instance, when you go and create a new object, let me just pick one here. It'll be easier to read here.
If you could just slide that window over to the middle, that'd be super groovy. Thanks.
That better?
Much.
Let's do
Yeah, the
something
rendering
that
is really
requires a create. So the major change is that when I'm creating a new node, I check that the required parameters for creating a node are passed in as part of the create function in the controller. And then I filter out any parameters that I don't want to, or that I want to ignore on node creation as part of the params.permit.
So you blacklist parameters on the constructor?
Accept all these parameters and throw away anything that isn't that. That way we can filter on a pretty fine-grained level what goes in and what goes out whenever we are creating or, for instance, just down here, updating a node. Like we can say that you can't update the ID, you can't update created at and updated at, and those sorts of parameters. You can't update, well, you can't update what deployment ID you're pointing at, but there are some other attributes that you will not allow to be updated via mass assignment here. And I haven't implemented anything that uses it yet, but with strong parameters, you can actually, for instance, if we wanted to allow updating the hence field that the node has, or updating the discovery attribute, you could actually construct a parameters permit that knows how to parse into the JSON that got passed and pick and choose what you will allow from there. So we could only allow updating specific sections of the JSON without having to write a bunch of custom code that does that for us.
So this would get rid of all of the filtering stuff that's done right now in the node roles controller, where we got a filter on this prefix and all that. By saying that you can only change these things, we would avoid having to do that kind of filtering, right?
Funny you mention that. Funny you should have mentioned that.
Okay.
So right now, when we create a node role, the only thing we let in is we let in the role ID and the node ID because we have to have them. and we will let you pass an initial blob of JSON data into the node role. And right now I haven't modified the updates because I need to figure out what Rob's intent was with that whole data prefix thing and see how best to subsume it. But I have plans for how to handle updates for things that have both a mix of active record attributes and Crowbar attribs that map into user data. And handling that would be significantly easier with param stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the params data. We could get rid of that.
Well, I can just permit specific parts of it, or just not allow you to update it directly, but only update it in the context of an attribute.
Right.
Like instead of like.
This is only Rails
update,
4.
This
is.
Yeah, this is all in Rails 4.
Only a feature of Rails 4.
Faster, better, more secure, more productive, fitter, happier. In a cage on antibiotics, that's the usual upgrade stuff. And this was the main thing, though, is that it makes by moving access controls from the model into the controller, we can have a finer-grained level of control. And I've already used that to vastly simplify some of the helper methods, like API show and friends. Now, instead of API show taking, a mix of 5 parameters, some of which can be nil and some of which can't be, API show takes exactly one thing, and that's the object that you want to show.
Okay.
So this is being So this is the entirety of API show there. It just returns the object plus the content type that we want for the object.
I can barely make it out because of the way that join me's rendering. But certainly looks cool from what I can see.
Yeah, join me is precisely the best rendering thing. Okay. Yeah, the downside to migrating to Rails 4 is that there is some manual conversion that has to happen, and pretty much all of that involves going into your model, stripping out any adder protected or adder accessible declarations, and moving that access control into the controller with
so they didn't just deprecate that stuff, that they've actually physically removed it from.
In order to get it back,
those calls, they're gone.
Yeah, they're gone from core Rails. You can get it back via Gem, but I decided just to go ahead and port over all the core stuff so that I could start using it.
Okay, so you could do the migration bit by bit, though. If you install this other gem, it will support those methods. You could do the refactor a bit at a time.
Yeah.
Right.
Where do things get interesting in the relationship between active record objects and adder objects?
That's going to be the subject of one of my next series of major pull requests. But the upshot is that from an API
Can you repeat that
standpoint,
question, please, Judd?
Victor, what was that, John?
What was the question that Victor was answering?
Oh, just where do things get interesting when comparing, or just get interesting in general when dealing with active record objects and attributes versus Crowbar attributes and objects?
Oh, wonderful. Thanks for the clarification.
the upshot end goal for doing a lot of this work is that I want to be able to treat Crowbar attributes the same as just attributes on like a node role or on a node or on a role or on a deployment role, so that you can query them via the Crowbar, so you can query and set them via the Crowbar APIs the same way that you do for just basic attributes.
Cool.
That way it makes it much easier to programmatically update things, like to go in and for a specific node set what OS you want to have installed on it. You don't have to go in. You won't have to go in and parse that JSON. You won't have to go in and parse that JSON and merge it in manually, because it'll just be exposed as another attribute on the. It'll be exposed as another attribute via the API, and Crowbar will handle the work of making sure that it's merged properly and validated.
Where does Active Record fit in?
What do you mean?
Or does it actually fit in?
It fits in that in the sense that all the attributes wind up being stored in the blob of JSON that's stored in Active Record.
Okay.
But due to kind of the dynamic nature of attributes, it gets a little painful to do the validation at the level of that blob of JSON. So I'm going to try to lift it up a level.
Gotcha. We are 2 minutes over time. You managed to waste another perfectly good hour with the OpenCrowbar team. Stealing a few lines from
all right, I'm dropping out. I have my next call to go to.
Thanks everybody for showing up.
And
thank you.
Get your toys on next week's agenda, and I'll be converting and posting this video to Suite and posting it to the list. Thanks a lot, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.